Hello, and welcome to the second segment in the Alchemy and Herbalism workshop. The second segment is about the light of nature. And I would like to start with what Paracelsus had to say about the light of nature. Paracelsus lived between 1493 and 1541 in Europe, and here is what he has to say about the light of nature. There is an earthly sun, which is the cause of the heat, and all who are able to see may see the sun. And those who are blind and cannot see him may feel his heat. There is an eternal sun, which is the source of all wisdom, and those whose spiritual senses have awakened to life will see that sun and be conscious of his existence. But those who have not attained spiritual consciousness may yet feel his power by an inner faculty which is called intuition. It's very interesting that he calls intuition that because we have this image of a light bulb inside our head when we have an inside. And as we will see soon, the light of nature has a lot to do with consciousness. So this first principle of alchemy that I'm discussing is the lumen natura, as Paracelsus called it, or the light of nature. And part of the reductionist mindset of the modern Western world is the reduction of natural phenomena to an objective material substance. When we look up at the sky and see the planets, we experience them as heavenly bodies, not as forces or beings, but as substances, as material orbits. Culture from all over the world saw the divine behind planets and attributed forces or power or influences to them on our life and the earth's. That is really the foundation of astrology, if you want to look at it that way. Different culture gave the sun different names, but for all the meaning was the same. They pictured him riding his chariots across the sky. So in the Egypt culture, Ra was the sun was the embodiment of Ra. In Greek mythology, it was Helios or Apollo. But the meaning behind, the influence was the same. Paracelsus described the nature of soul, the sun, as pure fire. It does not dissolve in the fire, so it does not dissolve in its own fire, and it does not evaporate or turn into ashes, but rather becomes clearer, purer, and more beautiful. It is the fire that has the power to transmute both matter, in the way that the heat of the sun evaporates water from the ocean into clouds and melt the snow into water. But at the same time, it has the power to transmute spirit in the way that it can burn the ego and distill our spirit to a higher existence. This picture of the fire that does not evaporate and does not burn into ashes remind me very much of the fire that Moses met in the desert when God appeared in front of him with his prophecy. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. That's from the Old Testament. In the beginning, and that's a description of Paracelsus, the way Paracelsus tells the creation. In the beginning, there was primal matter, And the primal matter, as Paracelsus describes it, is a chaos that contains all the colors mingled together, bright and beautiful. But at the same time that it's a chaos, it's got a lot of potential. It's it's kind of compounding everything that could be, all the elements, everything is there already, but it's nothingness at the same time. So there is a paradox of the nothingness and everything um, being together. From the primal matter, the four elements were separated. The first element to be separated was the element of air, followed by the element of fire. From that separation, the white brightness was drawn outward and made into a material body, which became the sun. The red transparency was also drawn out of the fire and transferred to be the moon and the other stars. So while the white brightness became one globe, the red was divided into many parts. It is universal in the white brightness, called in the red. The sun brings us dry heat, while the moon and the planets have a damp quality. Through the power of the sun, the rhymes on the earth are created. The rhythms of day and night, the season, the move through the seasons through the year, the life cycle of plants, the migration of birds, and the development of human consciousness. The light divided itself to many, many fractions and imbued all that there is in nature with those fractions. It is like a kaleidoscope. The light expresses itself in many forms and in many colors, but essentially the many are one. The light radiated from the center of the world, imbued all natural phenomena with intelligence, consciousness, and wisdom. The light of our soul is that which enables us to see the light of nature in all natural phenomena. If we make ourselves blind to our light by reducing our being to a separated material existence, the light of nature becomes dim in our eyes. We become blind to the divine in nature. Here is a verse by Goethe, who lived in the 19th century, that expresses exactly that. The idea that everything that we see outside there in nature exists also within us, and everything that is within us exists outside in nature. And the idea that everything that is multiple, all those fractions of light that we see in nature, are within us and are unified into into a one thing. So it's kind of a mystery how it happens, but it's a great mystery to think about and contemplate. And the idea is that if you take the time to learn about nature, you learn about yourself. And when you take the time to learn about yourself, you learn about nature, because they are the same. Plants learned how to harness the light in order to produce sugar through the miracle of photosynthesis. They transform non-matter or spirit into a material substance. The energy that fuels our modern world, all our culture is based on combustion of stored sunlight within ancient plants. Those are plants that lived thousands of years ago and were full of that energy of the sunlight and was buried um, deep in the ground. And when we dig for fuel, that's what we harness. We harness this energy to fuel our cars, electricity, heat our houses, airplane. We use it in so many ways, but it's basically made with by the plants from the power of the sun. Our body's energy is obtained by breaking down the phosphate bond within the ATP molecule in each and every cell, and in this process, a small particle of light called biophoton is released. So, in any one of your cells, in your body cells, in any given moment, a small particle of light is released when you produce energy for the function of that cell. And it's just amazing to think about. It's like almost like fireworks happenings all over our body all the time. While the light of nature cannot be directly perceived, we can see its influence in many processes in nature, in plants, animals, and in humans. Phototropic plants or flowers are flowers that follow the sun. They open their flowers in with the sunrise, and then they move the head of the blossom with the movement of the sun throughout the day. So when the sun moves on the sky, the blossom kind of follow its movement. As the sun sinks in the western horizon, those flowers are closed. One such botanical family is the Compistae family. Among the members of the family are sunflower, calendula, arnica, echinacea, chamomile, and elecampane. The flowers in this family have a very delicate, detailed form. They are very colorful, and their scent is very gentle and not overpowering. So for this family, the scent is not very important. But what is really important is the many colors. You know, if you think about chamomile is white and yellow, arnica and elecampane are bright yellow, very showy, and calendula is yellow to orange, and iris echinacea. And then you can see the details of the florets in the center of the flower, and the shapes that it creates. So the element of form is very important in that family. And what's special about them medicinally is that they bring light to dark diseased tissue and gently calm tense tissue. So they bring light into the body. And you can see that the affinity to the sun is expressed in the way they work in the body. I took a couple of courses in child development and I had a graduate degree in special education. But it wasn't until I studied in the world of teacher training that I really observed how children develop. By then I was having my third child, and as I watched Shira's development from an infant to a toddler, I was reading Carl Koenig's book, The First 3 Years. There is a chapter in this book that speaks to the forces that make children develop the ability to stand upright. And never before, during all my, I want to say, 6 or 7 years of studying child development, I never gave this process a real thought. We just assume that children learn how to stand up and walk. And Carl Koenig described how the light of the child consciousness pulls him up towards the sun in the very same way that plants grow toward the sun. So again, we see this connection between consciousness and the sun, and how standing up is really a development in the ability of the child to think more than anything, and it gives him the freedom to use his hands in the world. One of the myths that surround the alchemists was that they had the ability to transform lead into gold. Many wannabe alchemists from the Renaissance, up until today even, try to look for the formula that would be like the goose that laid the golden eggs. If anything, the true alchemists were looking for the divine in matter. They were not looking for materialistic gold. They spoke in a language filled with symbols. Lead was the symbol for the human ego, that through distillation process could be elevated into pure consciousness, or gold. Indeed, gold is associated with the sun. So again, the consciousness as connected to the sun, and the ability to elevate your consciousness, burn your ego, and become an initiate. And I think that's the process that the alchemists were involved in. Being able to see the divine behind nature means that you have to let go of your ego, burn it in a way, and elevate your spirit to an higher existence. Part of our New Age culture is to say that we are all connected. But the New Age movement does not really explain how and why we are interconnected. Some ecologists and environmentalists will explain that we are part of an ecosystem where all parts are interdependent to one another, and if you take out one part, the entire ecosystem fall apart. I don't want to reduce the importance of those two claims, but I do think that they portray or tell just part of the picture. Excuse me. The part that we, with our modern consciousness and with our five senses, can see, or feel, or hear. In order to see the full picture, we will need to develop the eye of the alchemist, the eye of the art. So we have to, in a way, let go of our intellect, let go of our ego, and transmute ourselves to a higher level of seeing. The light of nature is the principle that emanates nature. It transforms the many into the one. It is the unifying principle. An herbalist that looks up to the work of the alchemist for inspiration will work on developing the eye of the heart. They will try to let go of the intellectual learning that is accumulated during his or her training and spend time observing the plants. I can tell from my own experience that in the past 9 years, I spent all winters sitting in my study in front of the hearth, warming next to the fire, and read books and did research about plants. But I was lucky enough to have the privilege and be able to spend all summer in the garden. And at the beginning, when I read the material about alchemists, and they talked about learning about plants from the heart and listening to what plants tell us, I felt not competent because I couldn't hear anything. I was sitting there and waiting for the plants to talk to me, and they never did. And then it snuck out of me. Suddenly, it was there. It was sneaking. It was, yeah. One day it wasn't, and and the other day it was not. And I think what changed was my expectation. So just to be clear, plants do not speak. I speak to them. My interns always laughed at me, but they do not speak. You don't hear voices. Um, but while working with them, looking at them, tasting them, seeing them grow, um, hearing the wind through their leaves, looking at the colors, at shapes, at patterns of behavior, patterns of growth, habitats, taste and smell, you learn a lot. For me, I learned a lot from doing that than from reading the books. Um, I have totally different relationship with plants that grow in my garden than plants that I may order online. It's totally not the same. And I feel that if I have to order online because I had a disaster with one of the crops that I'm growing in my garden, I'm never as happy with what I'm ordering as with what comes from my garden. And the reason is that I know the plant. We developed a relationship. And I think I would never could have remembered all the actions and botanical relationships and chemical constituents of the plants if I didn't have a vivid picture of the being of the plant in my heart. Learning by heart is definitely not the same as spending time with plants in your garden. And it doesn't need to be a big garden. One or two of each of the plants that you feel affinity to, that you feel related to, will be enough. So I highly recommend establishing a small herb garden in your garden. That's it for the light of nature. If you have any question about this segment, if there are other questions that you have about anything, if there is a subject that you want me to tackle, please don't hesitate and contact me. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's enriched your understanding of herbalism. It sure did mine. The light within me, bow to the light within you. Namaste.